Hello everyone. Today, of course, we will fight against the utmost character of our world around us, as we do in every video. And today I will discuss with you quite interesting cultural phenomenon I have recently noticed. I will present you some my hypothesis, what I think about the reason that such cultural phenomenon exists. Let's start from the very beginning. Not so many people know that the country which produces the second number of Conan stories after the United States, in which the prematurely died genius Robert Edwin Howard created the character of Conan. The Conan was created, so Conan was created in United States, and of course, as one should expect, everything reaches the highest form, in most cases in the place where it was created, so one would expect statistically that also the largest number of Conan stories would have been produced, and I can guarantee you, most likely the largest number of Conan stories published till now was produced in United States. But the second country in which many people wrote many Conan stories is, surprisingly, Russia. Post-Soviet Russia. It started in early 1990s. Of course, these authors from Russia who published their own Conan stories, there is no way to find their real Russian names and surnames because they are using their pen names, pen names that sound very Anglo-Saxon, like Tim Donnell, Jeffrey Archer, like Duncan MacGregor. So it even sounds Scottish, but these pen names sound like names and surnames of persons coming from Anglo-Saxon countries. Okay, everyone can use the pen name he or she likes, and they produced many Conan stories. Some of them were translated not into English, but some of them were translated into languages I'm readable in, I can read in, so I read them. As a fan of Conan stories, of course, I like to try new stories, to read them, to know them, to analyze them, to experience them. And one of the story I read was written by the guy or guys or writers. I don't know if it was the only one or maybe more writer. He or they were using the pen name like Tim Donnell. Okay, and the title of the book was Conan and the Underground of the Captivity, something like this. Okay, so I was reading the story. The story itself was quite nicely written. The plot was not so bad. The description of the nations of Hyborian age and their culture and political intrigue behind it was not so bad either. The story itself was fine. But there was a problem with Conan, who was supposedly the main character of this story. But when I was reading this story, the Conan was someone like the actor of the second plan. The actor of the second plan, because despite the fact officially he was the main character, when one was reading this novel, one easily saw that he was not. And the Conan was not Conan himself. Because who would expect that Conan is dreaming about lying in a very comfortable linen? Who was thinking that Conan can be overfed with roasted meat, his favorite dish? Because we know that he was able to eat a lot, but he was always cautious and eating as much as he could to be fit and ready always to fight. And who would expect that Conan, to be waken up, needed to get a poke, needed to be poked by someone to be waken up? Yeah, his barbarian his barbarians' sharp instincts in the world created by Russian writers are gone. They are gone somewhere. No one knows where. It was not Conan. And okay, so I was surprised. I checked other stories. In other stories by other Russian authors, of course, they have hidden themselves under these pen names. In other stories, it was surprisingly there were the same problems, even more severe. For instance, in one of the stories, like entitled Conan and the Knights of Shadizar, Conan was using magic by himself, shooting with the thunders from his wrists, using special spell to do so. We know his approach. We all fans of the Hyborian agent Conan, we know his great despise he had for magic, that he was not regarding this as a honest trick, that it's worth being used by the warrior. So he despised it. He feared it because it was not honest, it was not fair. So it was shock for me. In another story entitled Conan and Punishing Hand, if I remember correctly, but most likely most likely I remember incorrectly, there was such a scene that Conan buried somebody, okay, and after it was written that he couldn't use the shovel to dig out the hole because the soil was frozen and it was too hard to do so. So how could he bury somebody before using the shovel and digging the hole for it? Okay, such things are possible only in Russia. Okay, so there are many things like this in these Conan stories written by Russian authors that are hiding their real identities behind the nicknames. That sounds like Anglo-Saxon nicknames or Scottish nicknames. But the problem is that reading these stories made me think, what can be the reason of two things? That in Russia, the second largest number of Conan stories was produced, and what is the real reason that they are so much different, especially with respect to the characteristics of Conan himself, from American stories or stories written by Western authors, because Björneberg, who was also writing some Conan stories, is Swedish. Okay, so my interpretation is like this. These are cultural differences because in steppe civilization like Russia, despotic civilization, the concept of real man doing on his own this what he wants, fighting for his freedom, for his rights, for this what he deserves, and having his own simple code of honor, it's simply too much to accept for these people, too much to understand. And being independent, being really free in terms of soul and free decision and taking responsibility for your actions and taking actions by yourself. It's not for the people from the steppe civilization that have to be obey to the real despotic rulers who can do everything what they want with them. Another reason, I think, is that Russians, after the fall of Soviet Union, they started having really huge complex towards especially United States. This is the complex typical of inhabitants of fallen empire, like Russia, like others, that these empires lost their privileged position as a superpower. So the complex towards Americans can be also one of the explanations, because okay, so if they lost their position as a superpower, they still feel, let's say, better than Americans. So they need to correct, in quotation, the works of the American writers, write them, they have to rewrite them in a better way to show that they can do it better. So this is the expression of some complex inferiority feelings toward Americans. This is what the real superpower. This is how I see it. and also the mentality problem that real archetypic real free man fighting on his own for his rights or for the weaker ones, really independent in thinking and in everything what he does, is completely not acceptable in their cultural frames. This is how I see it. That's why Conan stories written by Russian authors are so much different from the ones written by mainly Americans but also other Western authors. This is how I see. What do you think, my listeners? I'm really glad to and curious to hear your opinions. Please express them, and I think we will come back to this very interesting topic not only in literature but also in sociology. Take care, have a nice day, bye.